Our next option for some basic visualization is this Seaborn library. And Seaborn really is very similar to Matplotlib. It just has a little bit more functionality, a few more different kinds of plots, and it just kind of extends a bit about Matplotlib, especially for working with data. So another thing that Seaborn has is some built-in data sets. So let's look at this data set about penguins. And we take a peek again. Information about what kind of penguin, what island they lived on, and then some measurements and information about what sex. So I'm actually going to drop these missing values. There are some missing values in here, and they'll, I think, cause us some problems. All right. So the way that Seaborn works is we'll start by looking at just some one variable plots, or plotting one continuous value. Actually, is what we'll choose. Is any of our columns that have numbers, but the numbers are on a kind of continuum. All right. So for example, bill length. If we wanted to draw a plot of this, that would be very similar to something like this histogram that we drew. In fact, it will start with drawing a histogram. And the way that we do this is we say SNS for Seaborn, displot, and we can specify the data set in the form of a data frame that we're working from. So we're going to say data equals penguins. And our X will be, let's plot the bill length. And there we go. And so, again, it's similar to what we got from Matplotlib, maybe a little bit cleaner, but it has some additional functionality here that we'll explore in just a second. Okay, but that's our basic one variable plot. Now that is, again, if our one variable is a continuous value, but we may have something like a column like this island column that is not a number, it's a category. So what kind of plot would we make of one column of categorical features? Well, one thing that we could do is we could make a count of each of the different categories. So Seaborn also has a nice little plot called a count plot that'll help us with that, called sns.countplot. And we can say penguins, and let's look at the species. Okay, and there we go. Again, this is, a category. So the Adelays, just over 140, the chin straps, and the Gentus. All right, so there's two options depending on whether our column is a category or a number. And now let's look a little bit more at the displot. So start with the same thing. Our data is going to be penguins, and our X will be bill length. Is that what we plotted, bill length? Yeah, bill length, millimeters. But suppose that we wanted to see what the distribution of bill lengths was by species. Then all we have to do is add an argument here called hue and pass whatever category we want to break those things on, and then what we get is a resulting plot with that separates bars for each of the categories here by species. All right, so you can see, well, it appears from here that the Adelies have smaller bills than do the chin strap and Gentus. We can also change whether or not this plot is binned or if it's smooth. And the smooth version of it is called KDE. So there's also an argument called kind. And if we change that to KDE, now we get smooth versions of that. And we could also say, I believe we have fill equals true. And now we have smooth versions of our earlier plot. Okay, but pretty straightforward. So this again would take a lot more work if we were just using matplotlib to make that happen. All right. So these are the basic, again, like this plot is really the kind of jump off point for most of your one variable plots. And if we wanted to make a two variable plot, let me look at penguins again here. Maybe we want to plot bill length against flipper length. Then we can use Seaborn's joint plot. And again, we can specify the data is the penguins. The one reason that I don't like doing that is because then I have to write the whole variable, and especially if I'm working in Colab, these help functions blind me from a lot of things that I want to see. So I'm just going to instead call penguins, and then I can use these kind of helper functions to, or the completion, the autocomplete here. All right. And see, we get a kind of dot plot, scatter plot, like we were able to affect earlier with matplotlib. But we also get these kind of histograms on the edges. Again, we can change those to somehow. One of our arguments does that for us. I think it's the case. I think that if we just pass kind, let's try that. Kind equals KDE. I think that what that's going to do, though, is that's going to change what the, yeah, that changes what the plot is drawn of. All right, we can explore one or two more of those. Let's see. What else did we have here? All right, well, I'll do it for now. So that's a two variable plot. Again, we could just make a scatter plot, but it's nice to also have the individual features drawn, distributions here. And again, this would take a hue argument. And then you get everything kind of broken apart by that category. Okay, and again, you can change the kind of those. And suppose instead that we have, we did have more numeric columns. If we want to plot all of them against one another, we can use the pair plot. And we can just pass it the data, and it will generate each grid of each quantitative variable plotted against each other quantitative variable. So there were 4 features in our data, in the penguins data, that were quantitative. can see that now we have a pair plot where each of them is paired off against one another. And again, we can add the hue and get everything broken apart by that category. All right, so that's Seaborn. Disk plot for most of the one variable plots, joint plot for just the two variable, and pair plot for many pairs of them.